Welcome back to the Beyond the Wire podcast. I am your host, Tim Keller. Along with me, as he always is my co-host, Mr. Matt Disher. And we have a fantastic guest with us. He is a subject matter expert in the subject of military transition, and he's been working in the military recruiting field for quite some time now. So we'd like to welcome in Mr. Mike Piper. How are you, sir?
Great. Thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely. So we have 4th of July coming up this weekend. Matt, you got any plans for the weekend? Doing anything?
You know, I haven't heard any firecrackers yet near my house, which is really disappointing because by now social media has exploded with people saying, hey, fireworks are illegal in Ohio. And every year I have to explain to them that for 240 some odd years, we do this every year. And so then the conversations, you know, and we're all veterans. The conversations become, well, what about veterans?
Yeah, PTSD.
And I've seen a couple of yard signs. I have not seen one this year, but I've seen these before. The veterans who put up a yard sign like, please feel free to detonate fireworks near my house. It reminds me of freedom.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to some of that. I don't know if people have been pulling back on their explosives expenditures this year, and that's why I haven't heard any large booms in the neighborhood. But I am certain we always have some pretty good fireworks shows. Okay. I'm actually not going to be around for it. I'm going to be in a different place. But I am not planning on spending any of my own dollars on explosions this year. So perhaps somebody else near me will.
Mike, what about you? You doing anything for the 4th of July weekend?
Well, you know, I'm a huge woodworker on the weekend, so that's what I'll probably end up spending some time doing, some woodworking and hanging out in the garage and avoiding the fireworks, Matt. I'm not a huge fireworks fan myself, but where I'm at, you can't have fireworks that leave the ground. So kind of hampers the joy in some fireworks, I guess you'd say, on 4th of July.
Do they enforce that where you are?
No. We're too close to the border to another state that actually allows it. So they just literally drive the 15 minutes, grab it all, come back. So.
Yeah, they are illegal in Ohio, and nobody cares. And they actually sell them like right down the street. There is a major fireworks distributor right down the street. You can buy the big stuff there. You just have to sign a paper that says I'm going to detonate them outside of the state. It's kind of funny. It's like
I promise I'll go somewhere else and do this.
Right.
Yeah,
okay.
Promise. Yeah. I'm in PA. As of 2 years ago, I want to say we could not purchase anything that went above like 10 or 15 feet, you know, inside the state. I live close enough to the border and, you know, surrounding states that had more lax laws. So I was always able to go out and get those. You know, we normally would throw a pretty decent sized 4th of July party. And I'd take a bunch of them. I'd put them out on sheets of plywood. You know, with my deck cord and time them all up and have this big fireworks display every year. But we just moved into the house a little bit over a year ago. We don't have the same space in the backyard we once did. I was just telling these two guys I have a nice set of woods behind me. I don't want to light the forest on fire over here. So going to take it easy on the fireworks this year. I have heard them been, you know, for Memorial Day, things like that. I heard people surrounding me setting them off. And I know up by work the other night, I guess somebody was practicing setting up a show because there was a pretty decent fireworks display just randomly on a Thursday night last week for no apparent reason. But I think, somebody probably bought a bunch of fireworks and wanted to see how their display would look.
Right.
So
I like watching fireworks. I think the luster of setting them off, it's kind of a task to do it. And especially after you've, you know, for those of us who have detonated things like line charges, 1,750 pounds of C4 at one time, you can't ever beat that.
Yeah.
So, you know, when we're detonating landmines and blowing things in place and doing line charges and shape charges and door breaches and, you know, that's the good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
The $10 mortars down the street are nothing anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. So like we like to get into some news. We normally go to military.com. And I know we brought this up a few months back, but there was that 6-month clock now where the powers that be had to release anything they had on UFOs. So on military.com, there is a report here that says the U.S. report cannot explain UFOs, but says they are likely real and possibly a national threat. So many identified flying objects observed by the military and other government sources. Since 2004, there's 144 reports of unidentified aerial phenomenon. So actually, they've changed the terminology. It is no longer a UFO. It is a UAP, unidentified aerial phenomenon. So here's my conspiracy theory, if you want to put on your tinfoil hat, is they said they have to release what they know about the UFOs. They didn't say anything about UAPs. We'll just switch the terminology and we release nothing.
Global warming and climate change.
Yes. Now let's, again, if you break this down, it is unidentified. So even this report says, this article says that these are unidentified. They are not saying in any way, shape, or form that any of these are extraterrestrial. They could be drones, just flown by Tommy down the street. They could be other governments' aircraft. They could be a million different things. The old weather balloon, if you will. But yeah, 144 reports were released. These all largely remain a mystery. They are saying that a lot of these are witnessed firsthand by military aviators and observed by reliable sensor systems. I've heard stories from astronauts, from naval pilots, Air Force pilots saying, they're up there and they see this thing that they've never seen before, nothing they've ever come across, even similar, and they can't explain it. And it moves in ways they didn't think physics could allow. I've personally never seen one. I would imagine that these aviators aren't coming back with these fables, but you never know.
Well,
Matt, are UFOs real?
Well, UFOs, unidentified flying out. If I look outside right now and something is flying past my window, I'm going to call it an unidentified flying object. What we've done is we've made UFO synonymous with aliens. The problem is that that's what you're seeing on social media. People are like, look, the government acknowledged UFOs. Well, that doesn't mean the government's acknowledging extraterrestrials. Easy for me to say, as you said, Tim. And so what we're doing is, like, people are all like hyped up and jacked up. They're like, hey, look at this. Like, there's aliens. It's like, well, that's not what they're saying. They're simply saying that these things flying around, they don't know what they are. They could be drones. It could be Timmy down the street or Billy down the street. I've seen some pretty amazing drones. Some of the technology that people come up with. I had a neighbor who used to invest heavily in model airplanes or the battery operated airplanes, and he had some drones. These things would move faster than anything I've ever seen, and these were $1,000, $2,000 machines. So who knows? You see the videos from outer space where something's floating past the spaceship, and they've got some video recordings of it. The problem with that is that there are a couple of other space agencies around the world that are operating in outer space too, and who knows what they're dropping off up there. There's space debris and space junk just floating all over outer space. Doesn't explain the fast movements of small craft moving around in the ocean, and the Navy is picking them up with their sensors. But I'd just be curious to know where this goes in the future. If there will be disclosure of, hey, we have knowledge that these things are from another planet, that would be where things get very interesting. But for now, we just have no idea what they are.
Yeah. I'm interested. I'm curious. I'm curious to see what the public's reaction would be if President Trump came, and got on TV right now and said, hey, they disclosed all this information to me while I was in office, and this is everything I know. And he said, yeah, there are 100% actual extraterrestrials out there, and they come and visit us about 7 times a year. Like, what kind of reaction would the general public have? I don't know.
I think it would throw some common knowledge right out the window. Human existence, religion would probably be turned upside down. Like, things like that would happen. And I don't have any opinions beyond that. I just think that it would probably challenge a lot of people's existence. But it'd be really cool to understand, like, hey, we're not alone. And if you think about the sheer size of the universe, is it plausible that we're the only planet in a never-ending network of planets and suns and stars that doesn't have life? I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. So due to COVID, along with many other things, the Navy changed their grooming standards. They relaxed the grooming standards back in March of 2020. Navy leaders gave commanding officers authority to temporarily allow sailors to grow out the hair on their heads. They still had to shave and keep sideburns within regulations. However, in an administrative message that went out to the fleet on Tuesday, the Navy announced the authority granted to commanding officers to the message on Tuesday came back to the fleet of this is no longer the course we're going. We are going back to our regulations on grooming standards. So, hey, all you sailors out there, it's time to find yourself a barber. Go get the haircut. Along with this, the Navy had relaxed their physical fitness testing. I was reading an article earlier this morning that the Navy, for the first time since 2019, has ran a physical fitness test. So I hope you sailors have been keeping yourself in shape. There will be some people needing some extra exercise in the coming weeks and having to retake a test, I'm assuming.
So. I'll be honest, I wasn't aware that the Navy had grooming standards. Oh. Hey, listen, Marines are allowed to do that because they do the same thing to us.
Yeah.
And my dad and my brother are both Navy, so Navy, I hope they're watching.
Yeah.
I didn't know that they had standards.
Yes, there is no standards in the Navy. Just show up, we'll take you. And last week, I pulled an article from somewhere else on military.com. I have another one here this week. It is about a town of Brooksville, Florida, sold a man their water tower for $55,000. So Bobby Reed, who is a personal trainer, was looking to buy a small building at the base of the town's water tower. It's like a small garage that, the town had been using for storage for some of their municipal functions and things like that. So he bought the property for $55,000. When he went downtown to get the property appraised and get an address for his new business, the appraisers downtown let him know he also purchased a water tower filled with thousands and thousands of gallons of water. I don't know what I would do in the situation. This gentleman immediately went through the necessary steps to deed the water tower back to the town. So very good for him. That was very nice. I think I would have sold the water back to the town at a marked up rate. Yeah. I mean, he was just looking to start himself a gym, get some clients in there, get them sweating, get them healthy. And instead he bought a huge water tower. I think this was a interesting deal.
I would do what any reasonable person would do, and I would source tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of plastic bottles, and I would sell those bottles filled with purified water back to the public for the low price of $2.50 per bottle.
There you go.
And just make back my investment.
That'd be a killer Airbnb. Think about that, like a water tower Airbnb.
Yep. That's right. Airbnb. Dump the water. And then the town is like, why don't we have any water pressure? It's like, because those are apartments now.
Yeah. That's a fantastic idea, Mike. I didn't even think of that. Yeah. I mean,
we have a water tower local to me that is a firehouse. So it's a water tower up top, and then the bottoms of the structure, they cut out garage doors, and there's a fire truck and an ambulance in there. And there are, there's a berthing area or barracks or whatever you call it for the fire department. It's kind of cool, actually.
That's absolutely awesome. Well, this is, this right here shows how the small details are needed in most things. And this kind of leads right into what we wanted to talk about on the show today. Matt and Mike both work in the military recruiting world, and they're both very involved with the Skill Bridge program. And you guys were saying that some of the struggles, some of the rougher side of the Skill Bridge program is the small details. So you guys were both saying about how, respectively, you'll have somebody apply to a position at a company through the Skill Bridge program, and then they reach out to you individuals saying, hey, when do I get to tell my command I'm leaving, and when do I start? And, I'm looking forward to being in this location and working, and doing this job. So let's talk about these the small details. Let's talk about Skill Bridge for a little bit, because you guys are the experts here. So Matt, I'm gonna throw it to you, and let's take this away.
Well, first, I know we've had this conversation about Skill Bridge until we're blue in the face, because it's the new hot thing. And I say it's the new hot thing. It's not new. It's just newer to a lot of organizations that are now implementing it. And it's a learning process for everybody. And I think that in a lot of the speaking engagements that we share, Mike often talks about, hey, we're new to it as well. It's a learning process as well. So I think everybody's new to this. One of the issues that we're running into is that there is not a lot of guidance in terms of how the programs work. So companies are kind of shooting around in the dark, trying to figure it out. And we are implementing policies based on the guidance that is set forth by DOD. But then on the candidate side, every branch is doing it differently too, and they're all communicating it differently. And so what happens is that there's a little bit of confusion around how the program actually works once a candidate has applied to something. And I know, Mike, we were talking before we went live. Tell us about that. Tell us about one of those big pain points that you experience.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point, Matt, of the growth, right? I mean, 2019, I think there was 150 industry partners, and then now in 2020, it's almost in the 500s now. So it's gone to this extreme level because companies are figuring out what DoD SkillBridge is, but some of the small details that just service members don't maybe understand, and it's not their fault. A lot of times you join at 18, you've only applied for a job at maybe local retailer or maybe McDonald's, or you only had like a part-time job, so you only went through that interview process. So it's not your fault because you don't maybe not understand the process. But there's an entire process behind it to where it is an interview process. I know most companies treat this like a full-time job. Like they want to vet you out fully before they let you in for the skill bridge, because really a skill bridge is to help you bridge the gap between your transition, right? So for instance, myself, I was a mechanic, right? I know you blew things up. I'm an HR. How the heck did I make it from a mechanic to HR without trying to do some kind of transitional skills training in between that, right? So this helps individuals not be able to, one, like myself, go to college and take that burden of going to college to be able to get that bridge over, and be able to just take 6 months and learn the job. We have fantastic leaders coming out of the military, right? We have fantastic individuals coming out that can really make an impact in the business, but they may not know the civilian lingo. They maybe aren't used to the amount of the less amount of responsibility that they get maybe in the civilian world compared to what they would have in the military. Because in the military, you're 18, bright-eyed, shiny in the morning, and you have a team of like 4. Well, in the civilian world, good luck getting that until you're, mid-career, like halfway through. You've been in for quite some time. You've been an individual contributor for a while. And now you're finally getting into that spot. So it's a little bit different, but those small little details, like you just have to ask the industry partner, what's your process? Like, don't just email them and say, hey, I applied, here's my paperwork. Email them and say, hey, what's your process? What can I expect to go through while I'm trying to get a DoD skill bridge with your company?
Right. And I think that one of the things that I have to explain over and over again, to the point where I actually recently took on or contracted a third-party software, like a whiteboard software where I can create whiteboard videos. One of those reasons was that I had so many people knocking on my door asking this question: what's the process? Or rather not understanding the process. And what I wanted to do was avoid having to have that conversation in the first place. And I say that I'm avoiding that not because I don't want to do it, but because of the sheer number of people knocking on my door. I simply don't have the volume or capacity the capacity to deal with that volume. And so what we're aiming to do in my business is put some automation in that place where somebody, before they even knock on the door, before they even drop a resume, before they even ask any questions, becomes aware of that process, becomes aware that, in this case, if I've got, let's call it 500 people knocking on my door every month, I am not bringing all 500 people on into a SkillBridge internship. If we did that, we would be the most amazing organization in the history of military transition, and we'd be doing everything right, and people would be knocking on our door asking us what we're doing to be so amazing. We started this at the end of last year. We've done 15 so far. 15 doesn't sound like a big number. In our industry, that's a big number because we are not, in a lot of cases, our industry it's so specific to commercial real estate, property management, maintenance, and engineering. We're still trying to work out those kinks. My theory is that next year we get a lot bigger and a lot better. I actually have a new person that started this week that's going to help mobilize this program a little bit more, and that's going to deal with some of that volume. But what we tried to do is make a little bit more automation so the candidate understands the process. We're interviewing you as though we were going to end up hiring you full time. We just want you for the SkillBridge program to, again, bridge the gap, to close the gap on the skills, thus SkillBridge. So there is. Even if you take a person who is working on a submarine in maintenance and engineering on a submarine, and they're working on systems that are very similar to a skyscraper or one of the buildings that we manage, that person has 90% of what we need, but there's still that 10% of understanding how we do business, or maybe that you're not on a 24-hour watch on a submarine. You're not going to be sleeping in a rack, in a coffin rack, and then you got to jump out of bed and things have to happen. This is a 9 to 5 job, barring any emergencies during the weekend. So there's a lot of getting that piece of training and understanding out of the way. So we're trying to bridge that gap by creating a little bit of automation so that people understand what the process looks like, so that there's no confusion.
So Matt, you haven't found one of these naval mechanics like sleeping in the boiler room of a skyscraper yet?
You know,
I
don't know if that's called dedication or what, but
yeah,
you know,
I'm not supposed to sleep here. Like, by the way, when do we get chow?
Believe it or not, I hired a guy in a different company years ago who did sleep out in the parking lot in a tent. And it was because his family lived in a different state and they hadn't moved here yet. And this was a freight brokerage. It was a logistics brokerage job. And a lot of times you had to go talk to prospects. You had to snatch them up in the computer at like 4 a.m. or something like that. So he would sleep. He was a Marine. He'd sleep in a tent out in the parking lot and then go into the office at 4 a.m. and start snatching up prospects out of the computer to call on to sell business to. So, hey, I mean, they exist. They're out there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Mike, you brought it up, about this transition process, all those things. Let's talk about you. Let's talk about your transition. So you were, you brought it up. You were an Air Force mechanic, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was aerospace ground equipment in the military. So I was on the flight line with all the support equipment. I would have been Matt's top prospect, to be honest, just from diesel engines, hydraulics, mechanical engines, air conditioning, electronics, you name it. I was usually working on it. But yeah, not after 6 years in the Air Force, I was like, yeah, I don't know if I want to be a mechanic anymore. And frankly, the first thing I thought I wanted to do, I'm not really doing either. So I was like, I want to get into politics. I want to be, do something with politics. I want to do something to better the world, and kind of went to the University of South Carolina to study political science. I'm originally from Indiana. So, and if you know anything about the South, they're very much a heritage type area, right? Like they love people that are, from that area, everything like that. So went to University of South Carolina, did my political science degree, miraculously somehow, and I know most of you, Tim and Matt will probably understand this, but when you're a veteran that goes to school, you treat it like a full-time job. And you go the entire time, because basically if your butt's not in the seat at school, you don't get paid by the VA. So you try to make sure that you don't have to have a job during that time so you can focus on your schoolwork. But that ends up turning into a full-time job. So I actually did 4 years of school in 2.5 because we just moved, and I was not trying to have a second job or anything like that while I was trying to study. So I ended up doing that, ended up interviewing for some roles with some individuals in the South Carolina government. Started to get a feeling that it just wasn't going to happen. So I actually took a part-time job in retail. I was, I liked playing golf at the time, and still do. And I was like, I'm a college graduate. I really don't have any money, and I can't afford half the equipment I use. Mm-hmm. So let me go ahead and get a job with a sporting goods store, so that way I get a discount on it, at least a little bit, or maybe I'll get some demo stuff for free. Right. So took a part-time role in there, and then you fast forward less than 3 years, and you're the assistant store manager, training to be a store manager for them. And you're moving quickly, and you kind of going fast, and you like the fast pacedness. Loved retail. I still love retail. It's different every day. It's something that's really unique. But then moved into HR. So my significant other is an accountant, and she had an opportunity to come here to where we are now in North Carolina. And I said, okay, let's go. Went and jumped into IT recruiting, and then from there moved back into the retail space, and have been really working as far as in the transition space for military for right around in the military space specifically right around 5 years. But I've been in general recruiting now since basically, other than those 3 years that I spent in retail, my entire time out now. So I've been doing a whole lot with transition and just understanding it. And have been through now 3 myself, right? Because your transition doesn't stop just because you transition out of the military. Mm-hmm. You're probably going to have at least 2 to 3 more as you say, well, that's not for me. Yeah, I don't know about this. Maybe I can try this or that. It's something that, you don't know what you don't know, right? So as you transition out of the military, there's hundreds of extra jobs. I don't know how many people, and Matt, you could probably speak to this. They'll say, oh, I'm HR in the military. And it's like, yeah, you're an HR generalist in the military. You have to be specific in the civilian world. So there's tons of more opportunities for you and different paths for you. You have to become a subject matter expert in those areas. So it just kind of, when you transition, it's not one thing. It's not easy. It's a journey, and it is difficult. No matter who you are, I've still to run into somebody that said, yeah, my transition was peachy. It was super easy. It was the best thing in the world. I haven't ran into a single individual that's like that yet. I think there's some nuances to that, as you transition out, there's a lot of feel good that the government gives you before you leave. And you're going to be wanted like this is so much by the civilian companies. And then you get out and you start realizing, hey, I actually, may need to take a step back to be able to get in, and then I can take 2 steps forward after that. But yeah, so been in the transition space for about 5 years and absolutely love it. Love helping veterans find veterans and military spouses find employment through different companies. And even if it's not with my current employer, I still send them to other people. It's a space that I find passionate to just, hey, what do you need? What's the help you want? Just let us know.
That's a common theme I keep hearing from guests that work in this field, Matt himself, now you, Mike, is you get these candidates and maybe, Mike, you don't have a spot for him. So you'll be like, hey, I think your skill set or what you're looking for would be great for something that, a guy like Matt Disher's looking to fill, or Matt vice versa would have a guy, I don't have anything in that area that's going to look, but hey, Mike might have something. And that's awesome, because especially with veterans that are working in this field that you guys work in, you guys understand, like, hey, I can't fill anything, but just like we did in the military, we're not going to just kind of leave you out in the cold. We're going to do everything we can. And hey, I can't help you, but I bet you this person can, and I'm going to send you that direction. Now, Mike, I wanted to ask you, on your LinkedIn profile, you have Piper's Wood Company, Chief Executive Officer, and you said that this weekend you're probably going to be doing some woodworking. So what exactly do you do? Are you making furniture, tables, chairs?
Yeah.
What is it?
Yeah, so I make furniture. For indoors. I actually just finished an entry table. It's absolutely gorgeous on our website. It's made out of maple and pine and walnut. But yeah, I do furniture. Right now I'm about ready to do cornhole scoreboards for a few people. But basically, that's my little side hustle. I try to have something. I say side hustle. Basically, it's something to pay for my hobby, because woodworking is not cheap if you really want to look at the tools. So I've something to pay for the hobby. It's my Zen moment. I know, everybody that's in the military comes out or, is in really anywhere. You have to have that moment to kind of get away and just disconnect, right? So it is amazing what a cold beverage and a sander can do for your mind with a book and auto tape in your ears. I will tell you, it is the most Zen moment you'll find, and a great way to just forget about the world.
Is it piperswoodco.com?
You got it.
I'll be honest. I see, beautifully made. It's literally pieces of art, furniture, chairs, tables, things of that nature. Personally, I don't have the focus or patience to, if I make a leg for a table and, it's got all these grooves and carvings in it, there's not a chance I'm going to get any of the other legs for that table to look anything like the first one. I'm just like, it's close enough. Nobody want my furniture because
I tried to build a table. I tried to build like an industrial table for my basement a few years ago that would have like casters on the bottom, like a big industrial table that like kids could knock around and spill drinks on. And I ended up trying to build this in my garage, and my wife came out there and she was like, "Are you building a coffin?" and now it's a planter in my backyard. Plants are planted in it. But I think one important question is through your woodworking, Mike, can I find a portrait of Ron Swanson in a walnut frame, or is that something that you don't do?
Nope, that is something I do. That's actually on my wall. Yes, I'm a huge Parks and Rec fan, also a Nick Offerman fan. So who doesn't love a burly guy with a beard that does woodworking and drinks a bunch of scotch and has a good time, right? So absolutely a huge fan of Parks and Rec. Love Nick Offerman. But yes, Ron Swanson is on my wall in the shop against some knotty pine. It's a full knotty pine wall. walnut frame
That's
picture of Ron
fantastic.
Swanson overlooking the glory that is woodworking.
What
That
if somebody
is-
wants to buy this stuff and can you ship it?
Yeah. So there's an Etsy site on side there, so that way you can actually buy. You can request special things if you have something that you're interested in that you just don't see on the website. We'll make custom. I've done some pretty cool gaming tables that are coffee tables on the top that are dyed wood, and then they come up, so the top comes off and it comes into like the save space. So you can put your puzzle and actually not have any kids mess it up if you're trying to play with the game. Save pieces underneath, but there's a ton of different things that you could do. I still have my first, Matt, speaking of your first piece of furniture that you built, I still have mine. It was our kitchen table, actually, and it's still there. It may need a new top in a few days because wood movement is a tricky thing if you've ever really want to know. But we still have that. That was the first piece that got in there. And the last piece that I made is significantly better. We'll just put it that way. It went from, oh, this is okay. Like you can tell this is DIY. So now I'm looking at it, I'm like, wait, I made that? Like, how did I do that? Like, I shouldn't be able to do that. Like,
Right.
How did that happen? But once again, that's practice, right? Like even going in, and I'll bring it back to the transition piece. Like the amount of time that I've spent practicing on that has resulted in that beautiful piece of wood that is now in our entry table that has brass and walnut and maple. And it just looks like it came from, it doesn't even look like it came from Ashley's Furniture. It looks like it came from somebody high end, even higher. I don't even know who you would call for that. But it's same with transition. Like it's the same with your resume. It's a beginning thing, and then you got to make it a masterpiece. The same with interviewing. It's a beginning thing. Practice makes it a masterpiece. It's the same thing with anything that you do in life is like practice makes perfect, right? So it's something that can be said for all, is that you kind of look and you think about that journey. You take a second and you just breathe and you look back. Like you see just the amount of growth in yourself. Mm-hmm. But as you transition, it's not easy to see in the beginning, right? Like I don't know how many times I've thrown my head against the wall just saying, oh my goodness, how am I going to fix this? I just took this huge chunk of wood out of here. How am I going to do that? Or that was a rounded edge. Now it's not. So it's like one of those things where it's just like, how did I mess that up? And how did that end up that way?
I say this all the time about interviewing. To that point, Mike, you should go out and apply to jobs that you don't even want, because you want to come back. You want to have interviews. You want to get used to talking about yourself. You want to get used to selling yourself. And if you don't have, interviewing in and of itself becomes an art. If you're not used to having comfortable conversations with strangers, and that feels awkward, answering questions about yourself and your accomplishments, you're not going to interview well. Mm-hmm. And if you're, especially right out of the military, back to the topic that we brought up at the very beginning, this was a lot of these men and women are 18 years old when they joined the military. I know I was. I had interviewed for jobs in fast food and jobs, at the local flower nursery where I shoveled mulch for a few years. I did those, but those weren't interviews. Like, hey, do you want to come in and work? Can you throw a shovel around? I'm like, yeah, of course I can. That's not an interview. What happens when you come out of the military? Suddenly somebody wants to sit down with you, or a board of people want to sit down with you. This is where it gets intimidating, where you sit at a table with a couple of executives and a few hiring managers, and they just spit questions at you for an hour and a half. Mm-hmm. If you're not prepared for that, if you're not talking to people on a regular basis about yourself and your accomplishments, you're going to fall apart and you're going to look really bad in that conversation. So it's practice. It's practice. It's making sure that you get it right so that when you show up, you already have, or you've become really good at probably answering questions. Even if you don't have the right answer, you've become really good at kind of shooting your way around those questions and answers.
Yeah. My last interview, to put it in perspective, before I left the military, I showed up in the retail space, because I just walked in and I had a suit on with Chuck Taylors. Like not probably something you'd walk in on a normal thing now. Like I'm not going to walk into an interview with a suit on and some Chuck Taylors, but it's different, right? It's not what you expected when you were 18. One of the best advice that I ever got from any of my leaders that I've had, a fantastic retail leader out of when I was at Dick's Sporting Goods, named Sean. He was a phenomenal DM for me, and taught me a lot. But he taught me to take 3 examples of experience that you have with star theory and practice it in the mirror over and over and over again. And those 3 to 4 examples that you have can actually tailor into really any question that anybody asks you from a situational based perspective. So when you go into the interview, you already know your base questions and you're going to tailor your answer just tweak it just a little bit to make it perfect. But as you're sitting there, you're writing star on your pant leg, so hey, I hit all the actual aspects that I need to of this, and I came all the way back around to tell my whole entire story and make sure that I have no questions at the end, because I've hit everything that I need to when it comes to interviewing. I mean, interviewing is not easy. It's not something, it's intimidating. It can be obviously nerve-wracking, but it's one thing that I always tell all of our transition service members is don't think of it that way. This is legit just a conversation between you and somebody else about your experience to get to know you. That's it. Like in reality, in hindsight, that's all it is. They're people just like you, put their pants on, left leg, right leg, just like you. Like there's nothing special about it. They're just in a different position. So if you treat it that way and you go into the conversation like that, then you're going to have a more comfortable feel to the talk and to the conversation. And then on top of that, if you prep and you have those 3 to 4 questions already memorized and you've already practiced them, you practiced your introduction. I know usually if the last time I interviewed on the drive into the interview, and I don't know how many times I practiced about you. Like, tell me a little bit about you, because it's coming. Like, it's a guaranteed question.
Right.
Tell me about yourself. I don't know how many times I went through, and then you sit there and you go, all right, Piper, stop. You're going too far in depth. Like, make it shorter. And like, you're just coaching your own self in your head as you're going through and getting ready. But if you do that and you practice, you'll do a lot better with those interviews, because it's not something that's natural. It's not something that comes natural in the military. Military, you write bullets and you turn in a piece of paper and I'm going up for boards now. Or in the Air Force's case, you're taking a test once you get staff started. And that's pretty much, plus your reviews. That's all that really goes into that. Right. I think that's changed now since I've been out. So that shows a little bit how, when I was in and how old I am getting now. But it's different. And it's same with, Matt, I know you experienced this, and I'd love to, touch on it, is resumes and bullets, right? We all do bullets in the military, but bullets on a military performance evaluation and bullets on a resume are 2 different things by far.
Yep. Yeah. Something you said before, Mike, real quick, the nervousness of going to an interview and thinking of it as a conversation. I love public speaking. I personally love public speaking, but I also suffer from horrible anxiety sometimes. And I don't know if that's a product of the military or just something that I deal with. And so it kind of contradicts itself. When I go to speak before a group of people, whether it's virtual or live, I get super nervous. I get super anxiety. And something I've had to tell myself to deal with that is that I have nothing to lose and it's not going to kill me. And it's the same thing going into an interview. I have had people tell me, like, I'm really nervous for this interview, for this job. And I want to make sure that I show up really well. And my advice always is, you've got nothing to lose. If they say no to you, they say no to you. You don't have the job already. And they're not going to take you out back and line you up for a firing squad. You know what I mean? Like it's just, these are not what those things are. But to your point, Mike, about resumes, bullets, this is the other thing. We always see the ugly resumes, the ugly military resumes. I wish I could go backwards in time and find my ugly military resume.
Same.
Yeah. That was like, I have 4 rifle expert awards and I am skilled in doing explosives. And I thought, like, this would be so cool that it's going to show up on somebody's desk in corporate America. And they're going to look at this guy in the door. We got to talk to this guy. He's a live action hero, But what essentially happened after that was that nobody called me, not ever. And so I think what's driven me, Mike, you and I had a similar transition. I got out of the military. I decided to go work in the restaurant and bar business because I wanted discounts on beer. I'm just kidding. I actually, my brother was in the restaurant bar business, and Jeff Ruby's restaurants here in Cincinnati, which are like 5-star steakhouses. Jeff Ruby offered me a job, sight unseen when I walked in. I had a conversation right out of the Marine Corps. You're hired. You can work as a bar back. But I worked in that type of industry and then went to college and got a political science degree because I was like, I'm going to go to Congress one day. And decided that it's probably like the worst place I ever want to end up. But it took me a number of years to figure out how I sell my military service as something that people can use. And the tangible items that I thought people would really want to see, the weapons and the explosions and the deployments and things like that, didn't matter to anybody. That doesn't matter. What does matter is that I have accounted for, accountability of $1 million worth of equipment. I don't have to say it's weapons or night vision goggles, but it's, I have built training and plans and executed training plans around 30 Marines, in different evolutions of training. I've done these different things. Those are tangible items. Now, I'd still say even some of that stuff, unless back to your point, Mike, specialization in HR, for example. If you show up to a job interview and your resume is general, I've trained people, I've been accountable for $1 million worth of stuff. I am worldly experienced. I've operated with foreign militaries. That's good. We apply that to this job for which you applied. So my best advice to anybody when they submit an application or resume for a job is to look at the job description for which you're submitting, and almost to a point, copy and paste what that job description says in its bullets and put it on your resume somewhere, as long as it's applicable. Systems will pick out those keywords and rank you. But a lot of times, if you've got a 25-year-old recruiter looking at your resume and they don't know anything about the military, what they are going to know is that your resume looks like what the job description is asking for. Simple as that. They're going to spend the obligatory 8 to 15 seconds looking at your resume. You want it to stick out to them right away that this guy already has 3 or 4 of the 6 bullet points listed in the job description. Let's take a deeper dive. And even if your resume is confusing and it talks about explosions and weapons, you still have these bullets that the job description is asking for, and they might still pursue you.
Yeah, absolutely. Mike, I wanted to bring it back to a couple things you said there. First, the suit and the Chuck Taylors. You were just ahead of your time, man. You were ready for COVID. You were ready for these, these virtual meetings, these online chats. You could have been in the suit up top, and you could have sandals on right now. I can't tell. So you could have been in your suit and chucks interviewing for a job in 2020. No one would have known.
I imagine somebody in Silicon Valley right now is listening to this and going, "Hey, I want that guy."
Yeah,
that's our kind of guy.
That's our speed.
Hey, it was the 90s, right? It was growing up in Northwest Indiana in the 90s, and
so he got muted. Yeah, Mike lost his mic there for a couple seconds. So, Mike, you back?
Yeah, we lost sound. We lost your audio.
Oh no. Something else I wanted to bring it back to, and Matt, you'd probably be able to answer this. Is Mike mentioned some veterans, they get out. I'm a sergeant in the Marine Corps. I'm a sergeant in the Army. Whatever it is, I'm an E5. I'm going to be able to get out. I'm going to jump in. I'm going to immediately take on a leadership role. They're going to put 40, 50 people below me, things of that nature. Mike brought up the fact that they might have to take 1 or 2 steps back in order to just get their foot in the door, and then they can start working themselves up. I guess my question is this harder for someone that has spent 4 years, or is it, that person that is a sergeant major, is an E8, E9, in 05, 06, that's now getting out and goes, man, I don't want to go back to, I don't want to be the hourly worker and then hopefully in 2 years make my way up into that salary position, make my way into that office. What do you think?
I think that there are 2 ways to look at this. There obviously you got to make a living wage, right? So if you're coming out of the military, you're sergeant major and you've been in for 25 years, and you need to make X amount of dollars to support your family and your lifestyle, then that's reasonable. It would be unreasonable to expect that person to be like, hey, I'm going to go stock shelves at a grocery store for $8 an hour. That person has so much more skill set or ability to influence or impact an organization beyond throwing boxes on shelves.
Yeah.
So there's that piece. You don't want to take a too far of a step backwards. But I think that there's, on the flip side of that, there is the flexibility or the versatility, the ability for somebody to say, I understand that in 2 years I can get to that point, but I'm trying to come into an industry that requires me to have specific experience. So in our industry, it's commercial real estate. Somebody's like, hey, I really want to get into commercial property management. I can't take them right out of the military and be like, here, let me plug you into a property management job, because you're not going to have any of the experience doing that. No matter what your military experience is, you have probably not been exposed to what our industry does. You might have 80% of that in your leadership and management and administrative skills and things like that. But the idea that you got to take a step back to take a step forward, within reason, you should be willing to be flexible, to be pliable a little bit. You should be willing to learn. And I think that goes for anybody at all. If you simply come into an interview and you're like, I am not willing to take a step backwards, that might not make for a great employee, because that person's unwilling to be pliable. They're unwilling in some cases to learn a little bit. This applies to civilian jobs and military alike. If you're trying to switch careers, and especially if you're stepping into something that might be a little bit of unfamiliar territory, you've got to be willing to say, hey, I'm willing to learn. And if I'm going to make that, those top dollars in 1 year, then I'll take that. Because it's 1 year. It's 1 year of learning, and then you're gonna make some bucks, as long as you can support your family and your lifestyle. So I don't know, Mike, anything to add there?
Yeah, you guys got me now.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and I think I think it's a little bit easier for individuals that are 4 to 6 to understand the concept of having to look at that aspect of maybe taking a step back, where, sometimes, and I'm not going to try to harp too much on the DOD on this one, but there's a lot of times with like the higher level, like I had a master sergeant just recently tell me he needed to be in the C-suite. And I was just like, I don't understand how that equivalates for you. And he goes, well, somebody here at TAPS told me that I should be in a C-suite. Right. And it's like, okay, that's cool. But can you tell me when the last time that TAP director or that TAPS individual that is giving you that advice used to work in the corporate environment? I'll wait. And it's usually like never, or 20 years ago, or whatever it may be. And it's like, I get it. And I understand that they're telling you, you're trying to help you with the transition, but you have to look at it from individuals that are actually in the space 24/7. And that's why industrial partners are so important. Like, you can't be a state agency or government and announce a hiring campaign for military communities unless you have industrial partners lined up behind you to actually help you do that. Like, it is just something that just can't be, done. And I think, just the transition piece is tough enough as it is. And in the civilian world too, and Matt, you brought this up, sometimes you have to take a step back, but it's not the job or the title that necessarily always matters, or the pay. It could be the opportunity, right? Like, if you think about it and you look at things and you say, okay, look, like, this company's going through a transformation. They just hired a new CEO. They're hiring a new entire support staff. And you look at maybe the assets that they have, right? And the amount of growth that potential could be there. Like, it may be worth taking a step or two back to be able to say, hey, look, I'm going to get in there. I'm going to prove myself. I'm going to start this thing and I'm going to run forward with it. There's a lot more that goes into it. And I think that's the biggest missing piece for a lot of service members when they transition out, is they don't think a whole lot about that stuff. They think, ooh, I need to make as much as I am now, because I need to keep the same lifestyle that we have. Right. And it's like, you're going to make more than what you made in the military. It's not going to take very many years. I'm just going to tell you that straight up. It's not going to take long. But you have to be able to understand that there's more value in past the money. There's more value in the people that you work for, the company you work for, their values, the growth potential. Like, how much do they promote internally? If they don't promote that much internally and they just go external all the time, I don't know if I'd really want to go for it. I wouldn't take a step back at that point. But if I had a company that looked at me and I said, hey, how much do you promote internally? And the recruiter looks at me and goes, I mean, we've literally 4 out of 1 or whatever it may be. Like, we do so many internal promotions. I'm more likely to go to a company like that than I am to go to a company that says, yeah, no, we just pretty much hire all of our managers from external sources and all our individual contributors from external sources. Like, we don't promote that much or train from within. Right. So I think that's something that one of those things that's missed, but is definitely something that isn't thought or talked about at least it wasn't in my transition class. And of course, it's been years since I've been through that, but I don't think it's something that's really covered when you look at talking with service members about their transition. Like, hey, think past the paycheck, think past the work, and think of what you have from a perspective of work-life balance, what they do in the community, your growth opportunities. Because there's so many times where I have service members that are like, oh yeah, I'm an E7, so I need to be a director. I'm like, okay, our structure is a little bit different than most companies, but okay. Right. So it's just, you just got to look and you got to do your research, but you also got to be understanding that it may not be what you're being given all the good feelings from the military about.
Two things you said there. One, a piece of fatherly advice I give a lot of people when I'm talking to them as they're transitioning out of the military is, it's not this job you want, it's what comes next. This job is the one that's going to get you in the door and get you wearing the uniform, a different uniform, learning something. It's what comes a year later or 6 months later. That's the job you want, or what comes in 5 or 10 years. No CEO of a company, of a Fortune 500 company, was like, when they started right out of high school at 18 or first job out of college at 23, was like, I need to be the CEO right now. Probably a lot of them weren't even thinking they'd ever be a CEO. So there's that piece of it. But I think it's completely relevant that in a lot of cases they have to work their way up. Another thing you mentioned, Mike, is that work-life balance. And obviously we're in this space, the space in which we work, we're competing for talent with other companies. And something that we like to brag about is that for the most part, our jobs are 8 to 5s or 9 to 5s or whatever. They're regular work hours. People, barring any emergencies, people in our industry are not coming in on the weekends, unless you're in like a maintenance or engineering role or a property management role where if the building has an emergency, you might have to pop in on a Saturday. But we're not working exceptional hours or crazy hours here. And I have talked to a lot of people that go to work for companies where they have no balance. They are stepping right in and they're doing this 80-hour work week. And that's great. Again, if you're on an aircraft carrier or a submarine and you're working, 24-hour days or 12-hour watch shifts and things like that, you want to come out of the military and not have to do that anymore. It's probably one of the benefits of getting out of the military. The military is a great place to learn work ethic and, get all this experience. But if you have a family, especially, or if you intend to raise a family, or you intend to play golf, or you intend to do anything else and have a little bit of balance, you want to step into something that's not going to require you to be there all the time or during everybody else's free time. So, it's not always about the paycheck. It's not always about the title. Sometimes it is about, hey, is it a decent paycheck, but I also have my weekends off, or I also can go pick up my kid from basketball camp in the middle of the day. And if the answer is yes, that's what you're going after. That's what you should be going after. If that's important to you. Some people are like, no, I don't care. Nose to the grindstone. I'll work 7 days a week as long as I can get to that top spot. But that doesn't often equate. I saw a meme the other day on social media, and I forget exactly, I'm going to misquote it, but it said, stop dedicating your life to an organization that would just as soon replace you in 2 hours if you left.
It was something along the lines of, don't throw away your entire life for a company that will have your job posted before your obituary is
That's right.
written.
Yep. And
something along those lines.
It's so true that, dedicate yourself, do your job, do the job that you're hired to do the job for which you're earning a paycheck, and do it, be the best at it. That's my mantra is don't ever let somebody accuse you of not doing your job or not being the best at it. But at the same time, I have a kid. I know a lot of people have kids, people have families, they have loved ones they're spending time with, et cetera, et cetera. You have hobbies. You want to be able to do those things. You want to be able to be able to step away and do those things. So that is important, especially if you've just spent, I talked to a lot of people who spent 20 years in the military and they've been deployed for half that time. They have to, they want to catch up.
Yeah, and I think in today's world of mental health, right, I think it's important to remember that. Like, you don't have to make yourself a work-life balance. Get yourself a hobby. Get yourself something that you enjoy to get away from. I think that's something that and the military obviously is a 24/7 job, and there's so many weekend duties and there's so many phone calls that go. I always love the jokes or the memes of the sergeant coming to the door saying, "Oh, we're leaving in 11 hours for a deployment. Oh, we gotta go. Oh, never mind, we're not going." Then 5 minutes later, "Oh, we're going. We'll be leaving in 12 hours." And like back and forth. And we've all experienced that.
Yeah.
But when you're out in the civilian world, it's important, not only in the military, get a hobby and relax your mind a little bit, step away. But in the civilian world, it's even more important, just from a perspective of, you now have all this stuff to deal with that you've coming out, and in your transition, it's uber important to just take that time, relax, like step away. Don't make job searching your full-time job. Like, I don't know how many individuals I've ran into that like spend and make their job search their entire job, and they drive themselves nuts. And then they'll make a mistake and like send an email to a recruiter that probably shouldn't be sent. Right. So late at night at like 2 a.m. after, a few things have been consumed. Right. but it's one of those things where you just got to step away. It's the same as in real, as you have a job in the civilian world, have some time, have some hobbies, as it is for the job search as well. Take some time, step away from it. Only dedicate a few hours to it. Don't dedicate the entire day to it. Go do something else. Get away from it, rest your brain, and just don't let things control you so much.
I would say that, this podcast, this discussion that we have, it focuses so much on the job seeking side of the transition. But Mike, you brought it up. Probably the biggest piece of the transition for everybody is you are now back home or wherever you decide to go post-military. And the biggest part of your life should be, what am I doing as a person? What am I doing as an adult? What am I doing as a brother, father, sister, husband, wife, whatever it is? You need to take that time and focus on that as well. Do I want to go join a softball team? Do I want to start a wood shop? And I just want to spend a few hours a week out there getting dusty, dirty, having that podcast or that book being played in my ear. Do I want to join a gym? Do I want to, whatever it is, start underwater basket weaving or unicorn wrangling? Is Matt, those are Matt's two favorite activities.
Those are
matter of fact.
Great hobbies.
But I think that is a huge part of the transition that probably isn't spoken about enough, is the time you should truly invest on just but Matt brings up, apply to positions you're not even necessarily interested in, just so you can land those interviews and practice the interviews. Try things when you get out of the military. Go to a bowling alley, go to a softball field, go to a golf course. I still to this day, I stink at golf, relatively.
I get worse as I play.
I don't play nearly as much as I once did. It's weird. Met my wife who manages at a golf course, was playing golf at least once a week, minimum once a week when I met her. I've played once this year. But it's find whatever it is. I get to spend an hour at least a week on this podcast. I like to lift weights as well. It's for Mike, it's his woodworking. For Matt, it's his unicorns. You just have to find that thing.
Yeah.
I just wanted to bring that up. I think, Mike, you made a great point there of, don't turn your job into your life, because it's not your life. It's your job.
Right.
It is.
So with all that being said, I think that's going to wrap us up this week. Mike, wanted to thank you, for your service. Thank you very much for everything you've done. 2, wanted to thank you for joining us on the podcast today. In the podcast description, I am also going to put the hyperlink to your website here, piperswoodcode.com. I'm actually on the website right now, and I do see the picture of Ron Swanson. It is glorious. He is possibly, arguably, the greatest TV character of all time.
Agreed. Cannot disagree with.
Man, he is hilarious. No nonsense. He's so many people's introduction to the Libertarian Party. As a matter of fact, he's, I absolutely love the character of Ron Swanson. So the fact I'm looking at a beautiful portrait of him, it's amazing. So, check his website out. Check out his work. I know my wife will probably be getting some charcuterie boards from you. As a matter of fact, I like what I'm seeing here. So thank you very much, Mike, for joining us. We'd love to have you back at some point down the road, have another conversation, man.
Absolutely. Anytime. And I appreciate y'all inviting me. It's always a pleasure to join some fellow veterans and talk just in general. And, one of my biggest things is when I look for jobs is how many people am I going to impact in my work, right? And that's what's important to me. So being able to join this, like Matt, I'm a huge public speaker, is great, because I know in this podcast, you guys are every week are touching somebody and giving them some type of advice that's going to better them in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Matt, anything before we get out of here?
No, Mike, appreciate it. As always, good chat. Looking forward to more chats. I don't know if we're going to be on some events today together too. So we're going to hang up from this and go on to another speaking engagement. So, of course, as always, maybe we'll have you back one day and we'll continue the conversation down the road.
Sounds good to me.
Absolutely. So everybody, I want you to have a safe and happy 4th of July. Go out there, celebrate America's independence. Dump some tea into some water somewhere. I don't know. Tell the Brits to go screw off. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, listening, however you take in this information. You can check us out on all the major social media platforms, as well as all the major podcast platforms. And until next week, we'll see you right back here